So it's now time to turn our attention to the concurrency threading side of the house again. We've just finished up some discussions about some of the synchronization side of the house, but now we're going to go back to talk about threading and that part of the puzzle. And we're going to begin our discussion with an introduction to the Java Executor framework. And you'll see that there's a lot to the Java Executor framework. It's a vast melange, a potpourri of different interfaces and classes and so on. So clearly there's an awful lot of stuff here. We're not going to try to cover it all right now. We're going to take a look at it a little bit at a time. But in a nutshell, the key thing to remember about the Java Executor framework is it tries to decouple the creation and management of threads, and typically pools of threads, from the rest of the logic in an app. And you'll see that one of the key classes you'll have to know right up front to make effective use of Java Executor and the Java Executor framework is something called the Executor's utility class. And it's got a bunch of methods we're going to talk about here in a second. In Java, a utility class is a final class. It's marked as final, which means you can't inherit from it. And it only contains static methods. It has no non-static state, and it has a private constructor. So you can almost think of it like a namespace in C++. That's probably the best metaphor to think about, a namespace for a bunch of functions. It's got several different types of methods. It's got a bunch of factor methods that are used to create various types of thread pools. We're going to look at most of these over the course of the next several sessions. And then it's got some other stuff that are more sort of like helper methods we're not going to spend as much time on. So as we will see, the key thing you use Executor framework for most commonly is to make pools of threads or thread pools, and you use them to execute one-way or two-way tasks concurrently. And nowadays, of course, those threads would be mapped to multiple processor cores. Remember, these are the icons for processor cores. Of course, they're Apple processor cores, right? So we have the callable and we have runnable as the two interfaces. And callables, we'll see, are two-way calls, and runnable handles one-way. And I'll explain what one-way and two-way things mean. In the context of the Executor framework, a task is a logical unit of work that ideally doesn't depend on the state, result, or side effects of other tasks. So that's a really super duper quick introduction to the Java Executor framework. There, as you'll see, lots more things to be learned about that, but the way to think about it in a nutshell is the Java Executor framework provides a set of interfaces and superclasses and subclasses and so on that application developers can use to decouple creating and managing pools of threads from other logic that their application does, all the quote business logic. And you'll see there's a rich set of different kinds of thread pools that are supported within the context of the Java Executor framework.